Support comes from Soaring Heart Natural Beds, where concern for the health and safety of sleep now extends to everything from curbside pickup and delivery to secure in-store appointments. Showrooms in Seattle, Bellevue, and now in Edmonds, or online at soaringheart.com.
Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. State lawmakers were met with security checkpoints on their way into work yesterday as the legislative session got underway in Olympia. And the FBI is warning of more armed demonstrations at state capitals around the country in the days ahead. We'll talk with KUOW's Casey Martin and Austin Jenkins from Olympia in a minute. First, let's get you caught up. Seattle's police chief said Monday that the investigation into 2 officers who may have participated in the D.C. riot was done out of an abundance of caution. Interim Chief Adrian Diaz said the findings would be shared with the FBI.
I made it very clear when I assumed this position that any violation of community trust or any action that threatens our ability to serve this city will be met with full accountability.
The officers are on paid leave. Diaz reiterated that anyone found to be part of the riot will be fired. Amazon is being sued by the conservative social media network it booted off its web hosting service for not doing enough to tamp down calls for political violence. Parler, which says it saw a surge of interest after Twitter deleted President Trump's account, is asking a federal court to step in to block the move. In their complaint filed yesterday, the company says shutting them down would, quote, kill Parler's business just as it's set to take off. An Amazon spokesperson tells GeekWire that Parler is in violation of its terms of service, and the lawsuit is without merit. And a man who got national attention as a leader of this summer's Black Lives Matter protests on Capitol Hill is facing domestic violence and abuse allegations. KUOW spoke with 2 women who went on the record to say that Raz Simone physically abused them and coerced them into giving him money. Simone denied the allegations in a 3-hour interview with our reporter, Ashley Haruko. If you followed the story of CHOP, you'll want to read the whole thing at our website, KUOW.org. State lawmakers opened a legislative session like no other in Olympia on Monday. In the midst of a pandemic and threats from people who say they're intent on disruption, legislators, some on the job for the first time, navigated barricades and the National Guard to get to the chamber. Outside the state capitol, protesters gathered, some with guns. 2 people were arrested. KUOW reporters Austin Jenkins and Casey Martin were there and are here now. Casey, I want to start with you. Yesterday, we learned about an FBI bulletin warning of armed protests at state capitals around the country leading up to the inauguration. What are you hearing about that and the plan to handle it right now?
Washington State Patrol, they said today that they had received that letter and they were taking the letter very seriously, but they also said, frankly, we're kind of ahead of the game here. You know, we have so many troops here. We have a lot of police presence. We have this massive fence. So they said a lot of the safety protocols and a lot of the warnings that they're getting from the FBI, they said, we've already taken these precautions and we're already starting to plan and prepare for inauguration and other events. So they sounded very calm and very sure of their safety so far.
And you were outside the Capitol on Monday with hundreds of National Guard troops and a handful of demonstrators. What was the story outside the Capitol?
You know, it was really remarkable to see that so many people had said that they were going to show up. I talked with many right-wing groups that were planning to camp out on the steps and really have this kind of organized occupation. I spoke to people that said, I'm going to be at the Washington State Capitol 24/7. And then Wednesday happened, the attack on Congress. There was a security breach here in Olympia. And then a lot of those people just kind of disappeared. I talked to folks that canceled, that did not want to be part of this, were really worried about the violence. And what ended up happening was hundreds of National Guard troops surrounding the Capitol building and very few protesters that were planning to be here. Probably about 35 people at max today. They were armed. They were very vocal, but it was a very small group standing in the rain, facing off a wall of silent law enforcement.
And Casey, I understand lawmakers had to go through some serious security to get inside of the Capitol.
That was really wild to watch because there's this huge fence completely surrounding the Capitol building. And as lawmakers were showing up to work, they're pulling up and they're facing this checkpoint. It's like they were crossing the border into Canada. There's all these armed troops that come up to the car. They're checking ID. They get waved through. And while they're getting waved through, protesters are sitting there hurling insults at them, yelling stuff at them, and then they safely get to pass through both the fence and the police. So it was a wild first day for sure.
Austin, you spent the day inside the state Senate, the only day they'll show up in person. They'll be working remotely from here on out because of the pandemic. How did that go? Any disruptions inside?
No, it was like a different world in there. It was a lot warmer and a lot drier and arguably a lot safer as well. But it was in many ways, for as odd a day as it was, there were some familiar rhythms to it as well. But it did look really different. I was in the state Senate, and instead of having 49 state senators on the floor, there were fewer than a dozen because of public health requirements. There were some senators occupying the public gallery space up above. And when it came time to vote, it was like the March of the Penguins. They would bring them out single file onto the floor to the back of the chamber, and they would vote into a single microphone and then walk off. So it was a little bit like watching your kids do their little part at the school play, except this was actually the state legislature.
Yeah, and that's a lot different. It's usually a day filled with a lot of buzz and excitement, and the halls are packed with lobbyists and lawmakers. What are lawmakers saying about security right now?
Well, this was certainly a topic of concern for their families. I talked to State Senator Joe Wynn, who said his wife was concerned about him coming down here for this start of the session. And what he was saying is, state lawmakers shouldn't be having to think about that, and their families shouldn't have to be thinking about that, when really the focus should be on what are they going to get done in the first 105 days.
Austin, Michigan just banned the open carrying of weapons at their state capitol. Any support for that here? Are you hearing anything about that?
That's definitely one to watch because there's already a bill that's been introduced. It's a top priority for the Washington Gun Responsibility Group. That's the pro-gun control group in the state. And I did ask the Senate Majority Leader, Andy Billig, the question about whether this has a better chance this year because of all that's going on. He didn't commit, but he certainly made it sound like it's going to be discussed.
This is a question for both of you. The media has also been a target. I've watched video of journalists in Olympia being harassed and threatened. And I want to ask you, how are both of you feeling about your safety on the job right now?
I'm thinking about it a lot more than I ever have. And, frankly, my kids are pretty freaked out about me going to work these days, which has never in my entire career or in their lifetimes been a topic of conversation. That said, I also feel like we have a really important duty to be here to cover what's happening. I do think we look out for each other and that, at least at this point, there is a lot of security on this campus. It feels very secure. But just as the lawmakers are having to think about security when they go about doing their work, we are now in an era when we as reporters are having to think about our security while we go about reporting the news.
Casey, I saw some of the gear that you took out. You had a bulletproof vest, a gas mask, and a helmet. How are you thinking about your safety and security right now? Have you been harassed?
I have been harassed, and I feel like it's getting a little hairier each time journalists go out and try to do these stories. We've reported on dangerous, tight situations before, but typically we are not the target. We are just a fly on the wall of what's going on. It's very different when you show up where the crowd is targeting journalists. Some of the crowd was yelling some stuff at us today. These are armed people that have AR-15 rifles with them, and we're just trying to deliver the news. So I feel incredibly supported. As Austin said, I do feel like I have comrades here in the news media, and KUOW has been great to provide so much great personal safety equipment. But it is alarming that not only are we coming up and reporting on violence, but some of that violence is actually being directed towards journalists.
Austin, one more thing I'm curious about. Since we'll be doing the governing over Zoom this time, that's a first for state lawmakers. How are they feeling about a remote session?
Yeah, definitely. And Republicans were quite opposed to this idea of going fully remote. They wanted the rules to say that you could choose to work at the Capitol or work back in your district. They wanted to open the Capitol to the public. Majority Democrats rejected those proposed amendments to these new rules that will allow for a remote or hybrid session. A few key people will be at the Capitol each day, kind of a skeletal crew, but mostly lawmakers will go back to their districts. And they've told us there will be hiccups, there will be glitches. They are going to try to do this by Zoom. And, you can imagine all manner of things happening when it's lawmakers, but then what about when you do public hearings with members of the public? So,
Yes.
How many kids, how many pets are going to interrupt? How many people are going to walk through the background in their underwear? I mean, there may be a lot of bloopers when this session is said and done, but it's going to be interesting, and it is certainly unprecedented.
Well, we can hope everybody stays safe. Casey Martin and Austin Jenkins talking with us from Olympia. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Seattle Now is produced by Jason Pagano, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Clare McGrane. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.